Hello, it's the Security Weekly News, episode 325. I'm Doug White, and it's Friday the 15th of September, 2023. We've got Cyberdog, Pegasus, Webex, Peach Sandstorm, SAP, Caesar's Palace, Penn State, Aaran Leyland, and more on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Why does multi-factor authentication have to be a pain for users? It doesn't. Beyond Identity is the most secure MFA on the market and the easiest to use. They ensure that every authentication is multi-factor by default, with phishing-resistant factors that secure access from the start. Beyond Identity safeguards organizations from breaches, data loss, and fraud by eliminating weak phishable authentication factors like OTP and SMS push codes. Go to securityweekly.com/beyondidentity to get a free demo. That's securityweekly.com/beyondidentity to get a free demo today. Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the trusted browser for security-conscious professionals like you. Its ease of use for IT and security teams and added access controls protect the remote, extended, and hybrid workforce, keeping your entire enterprise safe. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome Enterprise now to learn more and start protecting your enterprise like never before. All right, it's the Security Weekly News. Welcome aboard. Well, Malwarebytes reported that a malicious Google ad impersonates the official Webex download portal and is ranked at the highest position in Google search results for the Webex term. So if you're searching for Webex. Now, if you don't know, Webex is Cisco's online collaboration tool, so just to mention that. The ad uses the real Webex logo, and this is nothing new to me, but the ad uses the real Webex logo and displays a legitimate URL, webex.com, which is the actual site for Cisco Webex. So, I was like, okay, so I don't understand the problem. I mean, is it a bad link or whatever? Well, apparently, Google allows advertisers to use tracking templates with URL parameters that define a final destination based on user information regarding their device, their location, and other things so that ads, of course, can be tailored. So when you click on an ad in Google, they allow the advertiser to detect who you are, where you are, and so forth, which kind of makes sense. I mean, I know it's a privacy thing, and we won't get into that. But the policy mandates that you have to display the URL on the ad, and the final URL must belong to the same domain. But there's nothing in the rules to stop the tracking template from redirecting users to a website outside the indicated domain. And I was like, wait, what? It was very confusing when I was reading this, but if you keep reading it and you think about it a little, it starts to make sense. But the story goes on, and it said that it's not a violation because they used a Firebase URL, which is called trixwe.page.link, and that was the tracking template. So that's not the actual final destination, right? So this is all like a lawyer dealt with this, and it ultimately leads you to webex.com. Okay, so here's the catch. So what happens is, if you click the link, what happens is they redirect you to this legitimate, according to Google, page.link site, which then filters out researchers and automated web crawlers because they're, this is within the rights of the advertiser. And then if the user is a target, they get redirected again to a site called monoo3at.com, where it continues to evaluate you to see if you are a candidate for these ads. Now, if you aren't targeted by the ad, then you get forwarded directly to the webex.com site, which is what you expected to happen. But if you are targeted, then the site redirects you again to a site called webexadvertisingoffer.com, which is a well-known malware dropper. I mean, we've probably all seen that site before. The download on that page is an MSI installer that installs Batloader malware, which then downloads Danabot malware. And Danabot is a banking Trojan that steals passwords. It can grab screenshots and overlays, and it loads other modules. It masks malicious traffic to the command and control, gives direct access to compromised hosts via a hidden virtual network approach, which are called HVNCs if you hadn't seen that term before. But basically, the guidance on this is to search for things, but then instead of clicking those links, going directly to the site rather than clicking search links, which is a bit much for a lot of people. I mean, if you're looking for Webex and you search for Webex and the very first ad in the list for Webex is webex.com, a lot of people are going to click that link. So very, very dangerous stuff that probably Google needs to revise some of their rules about if they're going to allow these things to pop up in the search terms. So a bit scary to me. I haven't talked about password spraying in a while, but there was a big story about it this week. An Iranian-backed threat group has targeted thousands of organizations in the United States and worldwide using password spraying since back in February of this year. The attackers have been stealing information from the victims in defense, satellite, and pharmaceutical sectors. The group is called Peach Sandstorm or Refined Kitten, depending on who you ask, and they've been active for a long, long time. So Refined Kitten's been around since about 2013, so it's a pretty old threat group that's probably government-sponsored. So password spraying, if you don't recall, is where a single password or a list of known password is used as a base, and they try to hit all the accounts. So it's kind of the opposite of brute forcing. It's like take a password and see if it applies to any of these accounts, because we know some of the people in this organization have used this password before, or maybe not, you're just guessing or whatever. But a lot of times they'll get a password on another site, and they reuse that password then to try to spray it across a lot of different accounts and hope they get lucky because somebody reused the password or just because there's weak passwords in that organization. Well, in this case, the attackers also then used exploits that were targeting unpatched Confluence and Managed Engine appliances that were being exposed online to breach these networks. After they got in, they used Azure Hound or Road Tools open source security frameworks for reconnaissance actions across the victim's Azure Active Directory and then harvested data from those clouds. They also used compromised Azure credentials to create new Azure subscriptions on the victim's site, or they abused Azure Arc for persistence on the network. They also used Golden SAML, which is a lateral movement technique. If you've not seen that one, you can look it up. Just don't click the top link, but a lateral movement technique, which then deploys AnyDesk for persistence. And that's really, really bad if somebody could put AnyDesk, which is a lot like LogMeIn or some of these other tools that allows somebody remotely to access and control the desktop. According to Microsoft, 3 years ago, password spraying attacks were among the most popular authentication attacks and amounted to more than a third of enterprise account compromise. So you might want to review your policies about passwords again, and you definitely should be pen testing your passwords anyway to see if these things are being, reused and so forth. There are a lot more details in the article. You may want to review, Have I Been Pwned and all these kind of sites that help you find passwords on your enterprise that are going to get you in trouble, especially if you're in those industries, because this is a state-sponsored agency that's targeting you. So they definitely will make a big effort. SAP released 13 new security notes and 5 updated notes today as part of their September security patch day. The most severe thing, and I'm not going to do all of them, but the most severe one in the new notes was a critical vulnerability in business objects with a CVSS score of 9.9. That particular one, which sounds pretty severe to me, can allow attackers to access information that could be used in other attacks. It could potentially lead to a complete application compromise. I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but it sure sounds really, really bad. The issues in this case impact the jobs folder of the promotion management component, according to Anapsys. A workaround they had that was suggested was that organizations should provide only, it's basically zero trust, but only provide required users with the necessary rights to access and perform promotions. And they should deny administrators the view rights on the promotion job folder. So if you're using any of that tools, you may want to take a look at that. A second report with CVSS of 9.8 was an authentication check issue in Common Crypto Lib. This would impact NetWeaver, S4HANA, Web Dispatcher, Content Server, host agent, and extended application service, and runtime. So a lot of different SAP applications there. That particular one can be abused to escalate privileges, but in the worst case, again, they said the attacker could compromise the application completely, which again sounds really, really bad. So basically, if you're an SAP user or you're an SAP supporter, check your notifications today for all these new notices that have come out this week and make sure you are mitigating these problems. Well, big-time casinos, MGM and Caesars, made a lot of news this week as what happens in Vegas was in danger of not staying in Vegas. I mean, I think most of us have probably stayed at Caesars Palace or MGM or somewhere during DEF CON or one of these other cons that everybody goes to. But anyway, it was widely reported that Caesars paid several million in ransom in the last weeks to avoid the data that had been stolen from them being leaked, and that MGM is apparently also in negotiations for a ransom as well. So Callie Gunther at Critical Start said that Scattered Spider, a threat actor that has been active since at least May of 2022, is behind the attacks, and that the tactics and info on this group have been known for a while, and that maybe these guys should have been able to detect this. There was a lot of controversy about what went on here, and that maybe Caesars and MGM didn't take appropriate action or whatever. Gunther went on to say that Scattered Spider uses a bring-your-own-vulnerable driver technique, which those are terrifying, but that involves the deployment of a vulnerable kernel mode driver as a way to gain elevated privileges within Windows system, which means it's really hard to detect and really, really dangerous, since those kernel mode drivers can pretty much run as full admin on the system. Well, Scattered Spider, according to Mandiant, is composed of hackers in the U.S. and the U.K., and apparently these attackers have never seen what happens when you cross a casino, like, say, in the movie, Casino. I mean, Joe Pesci knows what happens when you rip off the casino and you end up beat to death with ball bats in a cornfield in Nebraska, but maybe these guys haven't seen that movie because it said they were all pretty young. I've always had this fear of messing with casinos, like even just, using your phone down in the casino, and you don't want to end up in the laser room or something. Remember the one where Joe Pesci put the guy's head in a vice and made his eyeballs pop out? Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I tend to just stay away from casinos in general. But according to a post on the former Twitter, VX Underground said that Alf V was working with Scattered Spider and used social engineering to compromise MGM. So this was kind of, I guess, the ultimate point of the story. The post said that they had hopped on LinkedIn, found an employee, and well, the rest of that story. I mean, basically the social engineering is going to win the day usually. So, I mean, it's a very terrifying story that these $33 billion company is going to be broken down by, 10 minutes on LinkedIn, but that's exactly what probably happened. But anyway, if you're interested in this story, which sounds like maybe a future Scorsese film, there's tons of hacker groups named in this one. Well, you might be interested in reading this, and I would suggest you read up on it anyway. The U.S. government is bringing legal action against Penn State University under the False Claims Act. Now, this was a very interesting story to me. So basically what they said was that the university lied or misled about its adherence to government cyber protocols when contracting with the federal government. Now, I mean, basically, if you're a defense contractor, and I have been one, and I am one sometimes and sometimes not, but basically they send you this crazy list of things you got to comply with, and there's all these rules and regs and so forth if you want to do classified business with the federal government. And obviously that's a very lucrative thing. But even data that's not considered top secret still falls under all these guidelines. And this is how I got involved, because I wasn't working with classified data, but I ended up falling under tons of guidelines, which was really, really difficult for a sole proprietorship. But there's all kinds of requirements here. But one of them is that you must demonstrate how you handle information responsibly, and that's usually done by showing compliance with NIST guides, which includes 22 detailed control requirements. Now, some contractors are required automatically to undergo third-party assessments to validate their compliance. But other people just get to say, of course we're doing the right thing. We would never violate any of these rules. So let's call that the fourth or the fifth greatest lie in history. I can't even say the first two greatest lies in history without offending a whole bunch of people. But the third greatest lie in history is my dissertation is almost done. But anyway, the CIO discovered missing records, and the person working for the company was appointed to be the CIO and found all these missing records and other problems and basically blew the whistle on the university. So if you're a contractor and you've lied, Well, you may be getting a call real soon because they are now starting to prosecute this kind of stuff. So this is, one of these things where I used to do audits and we go in and we say, do you do this? And they go, yes. They go, show me. And they go, oh, well, we don't actually do it. It was just literally that ridiculous. But this represents one of the first attempts by the government to hold contractors accountable since these new initiatives went into effect last year. Now, there was an earlier case last year against Aerojet Rocketdyne, which was a test run of this legislation and the legality of this. So I think before you sign that form in the future, if you are a government contractor, you might want to read the form and you might want to make sure that you're actually doing what you say you're doing, because you don't want to end up being the CISO scapegoat that they say, just sign this. And I've been in that situation where they're saying, just sign it, don't worry about it. Just sign it, don't worry about it. And you're going, I'm going to read it. And they're like, no. And and then I didn't sign it. And you know how that ends. Well, a study from CRA focused on the threat posed by remote devices, which are outside your boundaries, remote workers, but nevertheless accessing your network. And that's going to include desktops, laptops, smartphones, tablets, who knows what all. Failed endpoint security resulted in some of the most destructive breaches of the past several years, including Equifax in 2017, SolarWinds in 2020, Colonial Pipeline in 2021, and HCA Healthcare in July of this year. The study they did was conducted online in August and focused on 200 security and IT leaders and so forth. The three most important things that they found, and the whole report's available if you're interested, and you can click the link. But the three most important things I got out of it were three out of five respondents admitted to one or more compromised endpoints in the last year. In fact, I was only surprised it was that low. 63% though of the respondents had more than 1,000 endpoints on their network. So that's a lot of compromise. The study found that only 58% of the respondents are confident that 75% of their endpoints are actually being monitored full-time at all. The number one problem was human error. Imagine that. Negligence and carelessness are still considered to be the top challenges to securing endpoints. So that means when your kid sits down at your work laptop and installs some game that's full of malware on it, that's going to be a huge problem. But half of the respondents are concerned that users will be the victim of phishing or social engineering, and of course they would be correct. This is still the biggest threat we've got out there. So if they phish somebody, they social engineer somebody at home, and they're using a work laptop, you're going to, that endpoint may not be being monitored. There's a lot more in the report, so you may want to give it a read to just review your endpoint policies. Well, if you don't recall, Pegasus is a spyware that can be planted on a phone, and then it is used to eavesdrop and monitor someone. And there was a reporter that got grabbed up by the Saudi government and essentially chopped up with a chainsaw, a la a movie almost. It was so graphic. And they were tracking this person's activities on their phone, as well as being able to listen to the microphone, to read what they're receiving in text and so on, and get their contact list and so forth. Now, Pegasus is really expensive, so it's supposedly only used by government and legitimate law enforcement stuff. And of course, when you say you're going to have legitimate law enforcement, does that include the Rhodesian secret police? That's a law enforcement. It's not a modern law enforcement agency, but the Rhodesian secret police was a legitimate law enforcement agency of Idi Amin. Even though it was a terrible dictator and they were basically torturing and killing people, but they were a legitimate law enforcement. So I don't know what their policy is, but basically this thing's been being used in addition to tracking terrorists, to tracking people that some government strongman person doesn't like. So for the first time, a Russian journalist found their iPhone infected with Pegasus. The journalist is Galina Timchenko, who runs a news outlet called Meduza, and this outlet was banned by President Vladimir Putin earlier this year because they said, I don't know, they didn't like his hair or something. But Timchenko has then moved the whole operation to Latvia, probably to avoid getting arrested in Russia. The spyware then was apparently installed while Timchenko was in Germany for a meeting with other Russian journalists in February. Timchenko got an alert about spyware being on the phone from Apple back in the summer and then turned it over to some people to analyze. And so Access Now, which is a big privacy organization, and the University of Toronto's Citizens Lab confirmed that it was infected with Pegasus. So NSO Group, who owns Pegasus, says it only sells licenses to governments for legitimate law enforcement purposes, but it doesn't exactly say how they define that. And a source on this story said that the Russian government, and the source was from apparently NSO, said the Russian government is not a client. So at this point, it's not clear who targeted the phone in Germany. Germany says they do have a license for Pegasus because they got caught in a news investigation back in 2021. Apparently, the U.S. has a license, and well, who knows who all else has licenses? Latvia does. Kazakhstan, yeah. Probably the Bulgarians. Who knows who has it? But the assessment said that the phone was likely compromised by a zero-click exploit which targeted Apple's HomeKit and iMessage. So, probably somebody went after them in Germany. Was it the Russians? Was it the Americans? Who knows who it was? But somebody decided they wanted to see what this person was up to. If you're interested in this kind of thing, read this whole article. There's a lot of detail there about this. Well, from a lonely island somewhere in the North Sea, facing the freezing spray of autumn, it's Aaran Leyland. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Dr. Doug. For some reason, the news today seems extra doom and gloom. What's going on there?
Yeah, I got that feeling too. There was a lot of really dark stuff going on. So it's definitely a time to check your security stuff out, I think. Or maybe I'm just being paranoid.
I was talking to a friend of mine who was on his 5th SANS course in Las Vegas very, very recently. And he said while all the casinos went down, there was a multitude of SANS courses going on there. So not saying that was the reason that it happened. But apparently there was some pretty cool DFIR people kicking about going, throw us some chips and we'll help you.
Oh, I know what I would target, and that sounds like a pretty good day.
Right. So capture the flag. Oh God, I got $3 million.
There's like 8,000 security professionals checked into the hotel to take all these SANS classes, and it's like they publish their schedule, so you know when they're going on.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's all funny anyway. Okay, so today's article is from a guy called Graham Cooley, and it states that car companies are collecting data on your sex life, and apparently we're all fine with that. This wasn't what I expected to read this morning when I woke up, but, totally wasn't surprised. So this is an extract from the car manufacturer, your Nissan. I don't know how you pronounce that in America, but their privacy policy goes on to say, so Nissan warns that it's prepared to collect sensitive personal information, including driver's license number, national or state identification number, citizen status, immigration status, race, national origin, religious or philosophical beliefs, sexual orientation, sexual activity, precise geolocation, health diagnosis data, and some ridiculous, and genetic information. So if this is not bad enough, and it's pretty bad, Nissan reserves the rights to disclose and share this information, of course, with all manner of third parties. So Nissan reserves the right to disclose and share this information with other third parties, which I'll just reiterate, includes sexual activity and even genetic information, which scares the bejesus out of me because I have no idea how they're planning on collecting the genetic information, and I don't know if that's connected to the sexual activity or not, or maybe that's a rumor. But Graham also tells us that it's not just Nissan. Here's part of Kia's privacy policy, which is interested in your politics and sex life. So it goes, information about your race or ethnicity, religious or philosophical beliefs, sexual orientation, sex life, and political opinions. Graham goes on to remind us of when Uber bragged that it was able to track which of its customers had been on a one-night stand. or Uber in an Uber way, calling it rides of glory. Good old Uber. Never seemed to be out of the news. Never for good reasons, really. Although I have got a 4.73 Uber rating, so I'm obviously winning at life. So the fact that we continue to buy cars from Nissan, Kia, and other companies with similarly nosy privacy policies suggests that many of us have no problem with this at all. Or is it more likely that we simply don't read the privacy policies? Obviously, personally, I think it's the latter. Although, what would we do with the information? Would it stop us from buying a car? Is everybody going to go out and stop buying Nissans and Kias now? And to be honest, are other car manufacturers any better? Honestly, if you want to look into this any further, there's a link in the show notes to the article, which the article directs you to Mozilla's Privacy Not Included project, which has worked to uncover how much of a privacy nightmare, according to Graham, I'm washing my hands of that cars are. But he says that Mozilla's report, I'm not ready yet, I will read it later, describes cars as the worst product category it has ever reviewed for privacy. Okay, so I do the work so you don't have to. And this highly sensitive information might be disclosed, obviously with all Doug's just talked about a minute ago, remembering that these companies holding the information might be hacked, so we don't only have to consider trusting them to look after it. Okay, so possible ramifications that I looked into today. You'll have heard all these before. Normal. Identity theft, fraud, blackmail or extortion, personal safety risks, job discrimination, and social discrimination. So a lot of food for thought to get. So I've put together, as normal, some ways to protect your general privacy online, and I'll just rush through these, and you'll have heard them all before, but it's good to be reminded of them. Use strong passwords. Enable two-factor authentication, regular software updates, use a VPN, secure your Wi-Fi, be wary of public Wi-Fi, and if you have to use it, as I always say, avoid accessing sensitive sites or transmitting personal information on unsecured public networks. Get your VPN up. Look at privacy-focused search engines. Consider using search engines like DuckDuckGo, although good for privacy, might not, maybe getting better at actually finding what you're looking for. There might be a trade-off, but I'm sure they're getting better. Regularly clear your cookies or consider using incognito private browsing. Will help a little bit. And I know some people hate this, some people love it, but limit social media sharing. Just be careful about sharing details online, and regularly review and tighten your security settings, because really, when I look at these, and I'm like, friends are saying, oh, how can I lock down my Facebook? And I write a little paragraph for them. Next time a friend asks me, I normally have to change it because they've changed where the settings go. Obviously, a favorite of all of ours, end-to-end encrypted messaging services such as Signal and WhatsApp, and avoid clicking on suspicious links. Review online accounts, and that means to periodically check and delete old accounts that you no longer use. Secure your personal emails. Think about encrypting them if it's important. Be cautious with email attachments and links. Always password managers, and as MGM might be aware of now, and all that other sort of group that's involved in the debacle that's going on at the minute, be wary of unsolicited calls or messages, or be wary of solicited calls and messages that might come from representatives that say they're employees or something like that. Make sure you have a process in place that you can double check who you're talking to is actually who you're talking to. And of course, listen to shows like this where you can educate yourself and stay up to date on the latest privacy concerns. Okay, on that cheery note, and now you have some food for thought, I'm going to jump in my car, as a wonderful song by David Hasselhoff tells me, and I'm going to leave you with some lyrics from The Genius. He says, jump in my car, I want to take you home. Jump in my car, it's too far to walk on your own. Oh, come on, I'm a trustworthy guy. Okay. Okay. Back to you in the studio, Dr. Doug, who would never entice anyone to jump in their car unless it was for a fine cigar and a great cognac, but not while driving.
Yeah, of course not. That's why I want autonomous vehicles, but yeah.
Me too. I want to go either drink on the way to a party or I want to go to sleep on a long journey.
Exactly.
Why haven't we worked this out yet?
I know. We got to get there. But was that song originally in German or was it in English?
No, it's actually in English. It's
okay.
absolute. It's a really nice song.
I know he was a big hit in Germany.
Yeah, big in Germany. And I think even Kit, the car from Knight Rider, makes a guest appearance in it.
Well, God knows what all went on inside that car. And, of course, it was probably reporting back to somewhere.
Well, it was the original sort of touting car that snitched on everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, my mother, the car, was the original talking car, but one of the
showing your age.
One of the worst. That's way before my time. That's supposedly one of the worst television shows. I've never even seen it, but it was supposedly, it's always listed as one of the worst shows ever made. And
that makes me want to watch it now.
No, I know. I kind of want to watch it because I've never actually seen it. It was sort of like the 50s, I think, is really old show, or maybe early 60s. I'm not sure. I know it was in black and white, but I've never seen it. Well, thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And finally, way back in 1993, a cartoon came out in the New Yorker that came to be called Cyberdog. The cartoon is basically a dog sitting in front of a desktop computer saying, "On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog." And now I don't know if you know this, but the cartoon went on to be considered one of the most widely distributed and possibly oldest of internet memes. So 30 years later now, the original drawing is going up for sale at Heritage Auction, and the original is expected to bring about $50,000. And I mean, in 93, I don't know how many people even knew what the internet was, because I remember answering questions about it way back then. But it was the New Yorker, right? I mean, they always have cartoons that make you go, what? I mean, that's the whole point of New Yorker cartoons, right? Is you're just sort of like, wait, what? What does that mean? But so if you want to buy it, or you want to buy it for me, well, it's supposed to go for around $50,000. But I know some of you, that's like me buying a cigar. So, you know what to do. Anyway, that's the news. Thanks, Aaron. We'll see you next week on the Security Weekly News if the hurricane doesn't blow us away over the weekend.